Imagine praying for someone to get injured and then it happens. Well, that's exactly what Drew McIntyre did, and it was the catalyst for the best feud we've seen in a long time. After almost a year of trash talking and arse kicking, CM Punk vs Drew McIntyre came to a close with an absolute slobber knocker at Bad Blood. And I can't help but feel like this is the turning point WWE has needed for a long time. McIntyre transformed himself into a grade A prick, which only helped build this feud into an all-timer, and CM Punk showed us exactly why he deserves to be called the best in the world. Punk left AEW in the worst possible way, with people doubting his ability to contribute to the wrestling business. It's safe to say he's got a lot less critics now. McIntyre, on the other hand, was stuck in a slump with an overexposed babyface gimmick that wasn't working, so he dug deep and channeled his inner arsehole to bring us one of the best heels we've seen in a long time. From preying on someone's downfall, taking the piss on social media, and tearing each other a new arsehole week after week, this rivalry had it all. The one thing it was missing was a closing chapter, and that's what we saw at Bad Blood. In this video, we're taking a look at the CM Punk vs Drew McIntyre feud. We'll break down all the key moments and matches, and explore the real reason why this feud is the turning point WWE has needed for a very long time. The story starts after the Survivor Series War Games match, when McIntyre stormed out of the arena, right before Punk made his big return. Nobody knew what was up at first, and it didn't take long to figure out. On Raw, McIntyre went straight for Punk's throat, saying the guy was going to wreck the locker room if left around long enough. When they finally crossed paths, McIntyre made it clear Punk's comeback was nothing compared to his own desire to become World Heavyweight Champion. After losing to Rollins on the Day 1 edition of Raw, McIntyre had enough. He turned all his anger towards Punk, who had just declared himself for the Royal Rumble, and he didn't hold back. Interrupting his promo, he went into full-blown trash mode, calling out their past from Punk's last run. McIntyre shared some backstage dirt that had Punk cringing. Apparently, he used to walk around like he was the king of the locker room, giving advice no one wanted, and at the time, McIntyre was one of those superstars that needed legitimate advice. But let's be real, no one was going to save him from the 3MB gimmick. No amount of advice would have helped him because he signed his release papers with that gimmick. Blaming Punk for his failure and ultimate release, McIntyre hit Punk with the hardest truth. He went away, rebuilt himself, and now Punk should be looking up to him as the real leader. This set the stage for the Royal Rumble, and after one Future Shock DDT, things went nuclear. Punk ended up tearing his tricep, and McIntyre thought it'd be smart to keep running his mouth, but karma's a bitch. Punk, his worst nightmare, eliminated him from the Rumble, leaving him fuming by ringside. On the Raw after the Rumble, Punk confirmed the injury, but McIntyre just couldn't resist twisting the knife. He told Punk he was going to headline WrestleMania for the World Heavyweight Championship, rubbing it in that Punk was on the sidelines. He'd dreamed about headlining WrestleMania, but before that promised one thing. Once he's cleared, McIntyre's days are numbered. Drew didn't take that kindly and went for a cheap shot, but Punk was ready. He countered and started laying into him, but McIntyre quickly turned the tables, targeting Punk's injured tricep, and the situation got nasty real fast, with McIntyre stomping on the injury before Sami Zayn rushed in to make the save. This was the spark that ignited the best feud of the year. After winning at the Elimination Chamber, Drew got exactly what he wanted, a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania, but instead of focusing on the prize, he couldn't resist being a full-blown prick about it. He kicked off his promo by taking us down the garden path, leading everyone to think he was hurt and wouldn't be cleared for WrestleMania. Then he hit the punchline. He's not CM Punk and nothing's going to stop him from making it to WrestleMania. But he didn't stop there. He sat down like Punk during the pipe bomb promo and continued to rub salt in the wound. As we headed toward WrestleMania, Punk showed up in Chicago, and by then Drew's entire gimmick was built around being the guy who injured CM Punk. and it works so well. He explained how CM Punk's straight edge, doesn't drink or do drugs, but spends all his time in rehab. It was pure scumbag behavior, but despite all the trash talk, Drew made one major mistake. He invited Punk to be the guest commentator for his match, and wanted him front and center for the big title win. At WrestleMania, McIntyre absolutely destroyed Rollins to become the World Heavyweight Champion. It wasn't even close. Drew made it look like a casual workout, cutting through Rollins like a hot knife to butter. The dude was so unbothered. He even found the time to hop on X mid-match and joke about being bored at work. Winning the top prize on Raw should have been enough for him, but nope, he had to be a cocky prick and throw it in Punk's face. That's when Punk had enough and dropped him on his ass and beat the hell out of him with his brace, stomping him into next week. Just when it seemed like Drew's ego couldn't take any more hits, in came Damian Priest, cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase to walk away with the title. Drew was champion for 5 minutes and 46 seconds. After months of trash talking about Punk's WrestleMania moment being ruined, karma came back to bite him in the arse, because his own special moment got shattered faster than anyone expected. McIntyre couldn't stop bitching about his title loss, whining about how Punk screwed him over. He made it crystal clear anytime he saw Punk, it was on sight. He thought Punk was done, that he'd ridden off into the sunset, and that was a big mistake. Punk was far from finished. McIntyre had a shot at becoming the #1 contender for the World Heavyweight title, and everything seemed to be going well. He was about to hit Jey Uso with a Claymore when Punk reappeared, distracting him at the worst possible time and costed him the match. Taking away McIntyre's WrestleMania moment wasn't enough for Punk. This wasn't just about a rivalry anymore. Punk was out to wreck McIntyre's entire career piece by piece and make his life a living hell. Things got even worse when Punk was a first round draft pick, and McIntyre didn't make it until the 3rd round. Of course he complained about it, going on a rant about all the ways Punk had ruined him, and then he got interrupted from Punk, who was in the crowd. Drew of course went on a wild goose chase around the arena, trying to catch him, but by the time McIntyre reached the director's box, Punk had already slipped down to the ring, casually cutting a promo and making one thing clear. Once he's cleared, McIntyre's life is going to be pure hell. It was like a twisted game of cat and mouse, but the real kicker came at Clash at the Castle, and I was there to witness the shenanigans take place. The Clash at the Castle pay-per-view is already a nightmare for McIntyre after losing to Roman thanks to Solo Sikoa's interference, but Punk, being the petty SOB he is, decided to rub salt in the wound. McIntyre was headlining against Damian Priest for the World Heavyweight Championship in his home country of Scotland. The ref got knocked out and McIntyre hit a Claymore to seal the win and went for the cover. A new ref ran down to count the pin, but stopped at 2. The camera switched over, and who was it? None other than CM Punk, who delivered a low blow to McIntyre and handed the advantage to Priest, allowing him to retain the title and forcing Drew to relive his biggest failure in front of his home crowd. Punk did exactly what he said he would, and Drew's life became an absolute nightmare. On the next episode of Raw, McIntyre kayfabe quit the company, storming out of the arena in a move that made everyone, including CM Punk, think he was done. But he had other plans. Just 4 days later on SmackDown, during a backstage segment, a garage door rolled up, revealing Punk laid out in a pool of his own blood, with McIntyre standing over him. McIntyre didn't just beat the hell out of Punk, he dragged him into the arena, dropped him on his ass, and then did something that took this feud to a whole new level of personal. He ripped off Punk's friendship bracelet that had his wife and dog's name on it. It wasn't just a fight anymore, it got dark fast. From a simple game of cat and mouse, the rivalry just took a completely new direction. Drew didn't just stop at beating Punk, he turned it into a full-blown obsession. He taunted him wearing that friendship bracelet like a damn trophy. It wasn't enough that he had literally spilled Punk's blood. He went even further by changing his display picture to Punk covered in blood, turning into an absolute psychopath. He even dragged Punk's dog into the mix, taking shots where it hurts most. There were no limits to how far McIntyre was willing to go. Thinking Punk was out of the picture for good, Drew got back to business. He threw himself into the Money in in the Bank ladder match, and like a man possessed, he walked away with the briefcase in hand. But of course, Drew couldn't have this moment, could he? Punk wasn't done making his life hell. The second Drew decided to cash in that contract, Punk struck again, perfectly timed to screw McIntyre out of the title once more. After the show went off the air, Drew lost his mind. The guy crashed the post-show, laying out refs and even elbowed poor AP. Drew was completely off the rails, and it was clear this war between him and Punk was far from over. After getting screwed at WrestleMania, Clash at the Castle, and again at Money in the Bank, Drew finally snapped, turning his frustration towards AP. All of this chaos set the stage for SummerSlam, where Seth Rollins was dragged into the mess as the special guest referee. During the match, Punk got into it with Rollins, and that split-second distraction left him wide open for Drew, who blindsided him. Rollins was knocked out cold at ringside, and Punk tried to get the job done with a GTS. He had Drew pinned, but Rollins was still down. By the time he came to, Drew had kicked out at 2, and things took a turn. Rollins and Punk went at it verbally until Rollins got smacked with the GTS himself. Drew seized the moment, kicking Punk right in the balls, and then a Claymore, and Rollins without any hesitation counted the pin. Drew thought he had Punk in his rearview mirror for good, and set his sights on the world title again, but Punk was focused on one thing: getting his damn bracelet back. Once again, Punk crushed Drew's plans, but Drew wasn't backing down, and after putting Punk on his arse, he pulled out his belt, ready to lay a beating. Punk ducked, snatched the belt, and beat Drew like a government mule. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. It was a collision course for Bash in Berlin, set for a brutal old-school strap match. During the build, Punk ambushed Drew. Then, just for good measure, he turned on the security. The stage was set. Bash in Berlin was about to get nasty. Compared to their SummerSlam match, this was on another level. The strap stipulation added a whole new layer of brutality, and man did CM Punk prove he still had plenty left in the tank. The action kicked off when McIntyre ambushed Punk during his entrance, blindsiding him and dragging the fight ringside. After a beatdown, Drew went for the Future Shock DDT, but Punk countered, sending him crashing into the announce table. As the match heated up, Punk found himself crashing through a table, leaving Drew with an opportunity to carry him around the ring as he went for the turnbuckles. But what he didn't know was Punk was doing the same thing. By the time they reached the last one, it was a straight up brawl to the finish. This spot perfectly used the stipulation to keep everyone on edge. The match came to a close when Punk nailed McIntyre with the GTS and started touching the turnbuckles. Just for good measure, he delivered another GTS, removing any doubt that McIntyre was done. After 10 long years, Punk finally got his first win since returning to the company, and to make it even sweeter, he grabbed his bracelet back before touching that final turnbuckle. The score was 1-1, but let's be honest, nobody was satisfied. After nearly a year of these two tearing each other apart, the feud needed a final chapter, and it had to be something big. That's exactly what we got at Bad Blood. Leading up to the event, McIntyre ambushed Punk, beating his ass on the announce table, and then dragged him into the ring. But he wasn't done. He ripped off Punk's bracelet, shoved the beads down his throat, and finished him off with another brutal Claymore. It was absolute carnage. Even with Wade Barrett, Jason Jordan, and the entire crew trying to break it up, nothing worked. It wasn't just a rivalry anymore. McIntyre wanted to rip the soul right out of his body. The following week, after seeing how out of control things had gotten, AP made it official. The only way this was going to end was inside Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood, and honestly there couldn't have been a more fitting place for it. After all the destruction, this match was the perfect way to close out one of the most intense feuds we'd seen in years. At the pay-per-view, both men stood face to face, ready to tear each other apart. No fanfare, no hesitation, just pure violence. As soon as the bell rang, fists started flying. Punk wasted no time taking control and grabbing a table. The fight spilled outside the ring, and Punk pulled out a wrench and went after McIntyre like a man possessed. Back in the ring, he jabbed him with the table leg like it was a damn spear, then slammed Drew into it like it was nothing. But McIntyre wasn't going down that easily, and sent him face first into the cage. Next thing you know, Punk was a bloody mess. McIntyre made sure of it, smashing his face with the steel steps. I haven't seen a crimson mask like that in years, and man did it make its return in a big way. After busting Punk open, Drew got in his face, making it personal, telling him his wife was leaving him. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to ruin Punk. Drew grabbed that wrench and dug it deep into Punk's wound, making the blood flow like a river. Outside the ring, McIntyre set up another table, and Cole mentioned the black armband Drew was wearing. It was for Punk's funeral. Drew went for the Claymore, but Punk dodged, and then he seized the moment by grabbing a toolbox and cracked McIntyre right across the head, splitting him open. But he wasn't done. He delivered another round of toolbox shots before hitting a brutal GTS. As the match heated up, McIntyre suplexed Punk through the table outside and slid a set of steel steps into the ring. Punk hit another GTS, but McIntyre kicked out at the last second. He then landed the white noise on the steel steps, but yet another near fall. Then came the Anaconda Vice. McIntyre, desperate, reached for the wrench, but Punk snatched it from him and hammered him with it. Blood-soaked and begging for mercy, Drew played possum and delivered a low blow. McIntyre then pulled out a bag, but it wasn't thumbtacks. It was the beads from the bracelet he'd ripped off Punk's wrist. In a vicious callback, Drew missed another Claymore and went crashing onto the steel steps, damn near breaking his back in half.
I broke my back. Spinal.
That was the beginning of the end. Punk, with a chain wrapped around his quad, shoved the beads down McIntyre's throat and hit one final GTS with the chain to put him down for good. And just like that, the Punk vs McIntyre saga ended in the only way it ever could, inside Hell in a Cell. This match wasn't just the end of the feud, it was the culmination of a year-long bloodbath that took two men to their absolute limits. The Cell was the perfect battleground for these two to settle things once and for all. I think it's earned its place as match of the year for sure. Hell in a Cell is where careers are made or destroyed, and on that night both CM Punk and Drew McIntyre gave everything they had. The match was a masterclass in violence and storytelling, earning the magic 5-star rating from Big Dave Meltzer himself. If you want to book a feud, then look no further than this one as a reference, because they both came out looking so much better. McIntyre needed 16 staples to close up the gashes on his head after the match, and Punk wasn't much better off. After the final bell rang, he collapsed, barely able to stand. It was clear it had taken more out of him than anyone expected. On the Raw after the pay-per-view, Punk teased he might be done. He didn't know if he could keep going after this, leaving his future in question, but we all know he's loving every second of this run, and he just got started with so much more left in the tank. After being away for almost a decade, I can safely say wrestling is so much better with CM Punk in it. The effective use of blood added so much depth to this match, and it showed that when done right, it can really take things to the next level. This feud set the standard for what heated rivalries should look like going forward. And that's all for this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the CM Punk vs Drew McIntyre feud, so keep the discussion going in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you stay tuned for more wrestling content right here on Wrestling Real.